Prostagma?
Want to make some improvements?
Real-time strategy games. A genre that used to be immensely popular, but slowly faded away with the rise of MOBAs and grand strategy games. But perhaps there was another larger problem that contributed to the genre's downfall. So, what was the first RTS game? What other titles set the standard along the way, and what led the genre to decline in popularity? When you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Depending on where you ask the following question, you will get a different answer. What was the first RTS game? I'll go with War of Nerves, released back in 1979. But for being one of the first games categorized as a RTS game, you wouldn't say it would seem like a proper RTS game when looked back at today. At least when we compare it to RTS games we all know and love from the modern age. Fast forward 13 years to 1992 with the release of Dune 2, RTS games finally start to seem a little more similar to the modern games. Arguably, Dune 2 is the first proper RTS game that matches with the gameplay of modern games. In Dune 2, you gather resources to create units at your base, but you also required certain buildings within a tech tree to create other stronger units, much like many other RTS games of today. Not long after the release of Dune 2, many similar games followed, like Warcraft, Orcs and Humans in 1994, and possibly the birth of the best known RTS series of all time, Command and Conquer 1 in 1995. These games created the foundation for all RTS games as we know them today. Although other titles may have added a twist to the gameplay, at the core almost all RTS games are the same. You have some kind of headquarters where you gather resources with villagers or cheaper units to upgrade your buildings and create an army to fight off the enemy. You either play versus AI in a campaign or skirmish battle, or against a human player. Depending on the type of player you are or were, you'd probably cater towards one of these much more than the other. This divided player base caused problems later down the line when the emphasis of RTS games surged towards competitive play with complex strategies. This then resulted into newer RTS games being unattractive to the average Joe who simply wanted to comp stomp some AIs by slowly building up a large force and crushing them. A good RTS game is a game that mastered the combination of both micro and macro management. Micromanagement consists of you managing your separate units and their formations and movement around the map. Macro management consists of you managing your resources and income and keeping an eye on the map and thinking about how to approach an assault. High-level play focuses on the combination of both good micro and macro. However, in some games like Command and Conquer or even Age of Mythology, high-level play includes an enormous amount of micromanagement. This level of play is not easily accessible for the average player because it requires a large investment of time to become intermediate, let alone mastering it. The player base that is interested in competitive play is small, because there are players out there who simply want to hop on a game and have some fun after work without having to spend countless hours worrying about becoming somewhat decent at a game to have fun. Because each RTS game was slightly different, even after becoming good at a particular RTS game, your skill wouldn't necessarily carry over as well as switching from a shooter to another shooter. To make a simple example here. The high skill ceiling and steep learning curve of RTS games gave other game genres the opportunity to appeal to a wider audience. And so the MOBA genre gained a huge amount of popularity because it was the bridge between ARPGs and RTS games. Big MOBAs like League of Legends and Dota are still immensely popular today, and they appeal to the people that enjoy the micromanagement of RTS games. In MOBA games, you start off weak and you work your way up to being a force to reckon with. And at the core, this is also extremely similar to the RTS playstyle. In MOBAs, losing is more forgiving and there is instant gratification giving you that short dopamine rush. While in RTS games, there isn't that short dopamine rush. In fact, this is something that is well apparent throughout the entire gaming industry. They follow the market and make games more fun for casual players. Take Call of Duty for example. They moved from kill streaks to score streaks, and they also started adding specialists years ago with Black Ops 3 to give worse players an easier time by basically handing them free kills, to give those players that short dopamine rush regardless of skill in every game. If I'm being entirely honest, that topic could be a video in itself, since it has its own pros and cons and it could be a large discussion. But the point I'm trying to make is that perhaps if the RTS genre focused more on appealing to the casual players instead of esports and competitive multiplayer play, it might have been more popular today. Now, I didn't mention this before, but the players that enjoyed the macro-managing more than the micromanagement have moved on to grand strategy games like Total War, Civilization, and possibly city building and industry games like City Skylines and Anno. All of the above mentioned games are overwhelmingly popular when compared to any old school RTS game today, further proving my point that the RTS genre has been on the decline for years. Now, one series that could have had the potential to still be relevant today was Command and Conquer. Command and Conquer was produced by Westwood Studios, the same company that created the first true RTS game being Dune 2. However, in 2003, Westwood Studios was taken over by EA, and as you all surely know, EA isn't exactly known doing much good with game series and titles after purchasing these smaller companies. Whatever the last good Command and Conquer game was is up for discussion, but I think it's either Command & Conquer Generals or Command & Conquer 3 Tiberian Wars and its Kane's Wrath expansion. Whatever your opinion may be on the last good Command & Conquer game, I think we can all agree that Tiberian Alliances and Command & Conquer Rivals were absolute horseshit and a disgrace to the series' name. What made Command & Conquer so great were aspects like the great soundtrack and visuals, the relatively simple playstyle with not too many buildings and just one resource being money to spend on everything in the game, not multiple resources for every unit, just cash, simple, money. A fantastic campaign with briefing videos that had surprisingly good acting also helped, and the games were just a great single player experience, but just as easily could be a fun LAN party experience as well. Also, I know that Command & Conquer isn't the only RTS game series that was ruined over time, at least according to the fans. I've heard negative things about Age of Empires 3 for example, but then again I've also heard many good things about the remaster of the second game. Now, two other prime examples of what made a good RTS game were both Empire Earth and Age of Mythology. Both of these games had an excellent single player campaign that was diverse and had a decent story to it. Both of these games can be played easily by the average Joe given that you don't play online or against the hardest AI. Now, Age of Mythology let you play like a casual, but you could also play competitively online, especially with the remastered extended edition. But at that point you run into the game not being for casuals any longer because the same problem of new RTS games arises, player versus player just isn't for casuals. And you will get harassed constantly with rushes and that playstyle just isn't appealing to those casual players. And I understand that that type of gameplay is appealing to some players including myself, but the classic RTS experience was to turtle and to build up a large force to annihilate your enemy. Online you will have to adapt to other tactics because you will never be able to beat your opponent if you do not damage their economy by harassing them constantly. Again, if this does fit your playstyle, there is nothing wrong with that. In fact, I do enjoy this type of playstyle sometimes. However, the majority of the RTS players were not interested in that type of gameplay or they would have stuck around. With that being said, the RTS genre isn't dead. There are still remasters that are being made today. The RTS genre just is a lot less popular than what it used to be, and some large companies have ruined certain series. Others didn't see the point to create more RTS games from a financial perspective, and some players have simply moved on to other game genres to get a similar experience with a lower barrier of entry. Now before I end the video off, I just want to mention one more thing. The RTS genre is subjective. For example, Total War games kind of fall under RTS as well, but are also grand strategy games. There are games that are also RTS games, but are very different to the games I've mentioned in this video, being classic RTS games like Frostpunk, where you fight against the environment instead of an enemy AI or player, and They Are Billions, where you fight off waves of zombies. And so we reached the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like down below and maybe consider sharing your fondest memories or favorite RTS game of all time in the comments down below. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.